Hello, I'm Mrs. Ruma Dhanwate from Aryan College of Arts, Commerce and Science. In this video lecture, we shall see different architectural styles. What is an architectural style? Every software requires a proper plan and detailed blueprint before stepping into the development. Software architecture is the high-level structure used for creating software systems and is actually a step-by-step blueprint of the entire software that is to be built. The purpose of the software and its specific functionalities are defined by the software's architectural style and pattern used. The architectural style is a very specific solution to a particular software which typically focuses on how to organize the code created for the software. It focuses on creating the layers and modules of the software and allowing an appropriate interaction between the various modules for giving the right results upon implementation. The software needs the architectural design to represent the design of the software. IEEE defines architectural design as the process of defining a collection of hardware and software components and their interfaces to establish the framework for the development of a computer system. The software that is built for computer-based systems can exhibit or show one of these many architectural styles. Each style will describe a system category that consists of a set of components, that is, a database or a computational models or both, that will perform a function required by the system. The set of connectors will help in coordination, communication, and cooperation between the components. Conditions that how components can be integrated to form the system. Semantic models that help the designer to understand the overall properties of the system. The use of architectural styles is to establish a structure for all the components of the system. Now these are the different types of architectural styles. Pipes and filters, data abstraction and object-oriented organization. Third is event-based implicit invocation. The next one, layered systems, repositories, interpreters, and we will see some familiar architectures and heterogeneous architectures. First is pipes and filters. We have come across these words, pipes and filters. The pipes are used to connect two commands. So they take the output of one command and give it to another command. And what do the filters do? They take the input data, process the data, and give you the output. Example of filters are sort command, WC command, then cut command, head and tail command. These are all filters. So the figure 1 shows you the combination of pipes and filters. So pipe and filters, this kind of architecture is used when input data to be transformed into output data through a series of computational manipulative components. The figure 1 represents the pipe and filter architecture since it uses both pipe and filter and it has a set of components called filters connected by pipes. Pipes are used to transmit data from one component to the next. Each filter will work independently and is assigned to take data input of a certain form and produces data output to the next filter of a specified form. The filters don't require any knowledge of the working of neighboring filters. If the data flow degenerates into a single line of transforms, then it is termed as batch sequential. The structure accepts the batch of data and then applies a series of sequential components to transform it. The properties of pipes and filters. They allow the designer to understand the overall input or output behavior of the system as a simple composition of the behavior of the individual filters. They support reuse, that is, any two filters can be bound together or hooked together provided they agree on the data being transmitted between them. Distance can be easily maintained and enhanced. New filters can be added to existing systems, and old filters can be replaced by improved ones or new ones. They support concurrent execution. Each filter can be implemented as a separate task and executed in parallel with other filters. Disadvantages of pipes and filters. Pipe and filter systems often lead to batch organization of processing. Although filters can process data incrementally, since filters are inherently independent, the designer is forced to think of each filter as providing a complete transformation of input data to output data. It simply means that you have to think what should be the input and what should be the output. So accordingly, you have to think what should be the filters and at what point you should use the filter so that you get the output accordingly. Pipes and filter systems are typically not good at handling interactive applications. This problem is most severe when incremental displays updates are required because the output pattern for incremental updates is radically different from the pattern for filter output. They are hampered by having to maintain correspondence between two separate but related streams. Now, this table has been taken from one of the prescribed books for software architecture and design patterns. So it gives you the overview, what are the elements, that is pipes and filters, then the relationships, the constraints, and the weaknesses. The second is data abstraction and object-oriented organization. In this style, data representation and their associated primitive operations are encapsulated in an abstract data type or object. We have seen object-oriented programming, C++ and Java. So that is the same thing, data abstraction, which we use in object-oriented programming. The components of a system encapsulate data and the operations that must be applied to manipulate the data. The coordination and communication between the components are established via message passing. Objects interact through functions and procedure invocation. The two important aspects of this style are: first, that an object is responsible for preserving the integrity of its representation, and second, that the representation is hidden from other objects. Now this is a diagram of abstract data types and objects. You see here there is object is a manager and operation is an invocation. So objects interact with each other through the operations. The properties: object hides its representation from its clients, so it is possible to change the implementation without affecting those clients. The bundling of a set of accessing routines with data they manipulate allows the designers to decompose problems into collection of interacting agents. So these are the properties of data abstraction and object orientation organization. And the disadvantages: in order for one object to interact with another, it must know the identity of that other object. So whenever the identity of an object changes, it is necessary to modify all other objects that explicitly invoke it. The next is event-based implicit invocation. Event-driven architecture is an architectural style where components in the system emit or announce events and react to events. Instead of component A directly calling component B when some event occurs, component A just announces an event. Component A knows nothing about which components listen for its events. In implicit invocation, instead of invoking a procedure directly, a component can announce or broadcast one or more events. Other components in the system can register an interest in an event by associating a procedure with the event. When the event is announced, the system itself invokes all of the procedures that have been registered for the event. Does an event announcement implicitly causes the invocation of procedures in other modules? Now this is a diagram for event-based invocation. Advantages of event-based implicit invocation. It supports reuse. Any component can be introduced into a system simply by registering it for the events of that system. Implicit invocation eases system evolution. Components may be replaced by other components without affecting the interfaces of other components in the system. Disadvantages of event-based implicit invocation. Components relinquish control over the computation performed by the system. When a component announces an event, it has no idea what other components will respond to it. Component announcing the event does not know what other components are interested in the events it announces. It cannot rely on the order in which they are invoked, and it does not know when they are finished. Sometimes data can be passed with the event, but in other situations, event systems must rely on shared repository for interaction. So global performance and resource management can become a serious issue. Reasoning about correctness can be problematic since the meaning of the procedure that announces that event will depend on the context of bindings in which it is invoked. Next is the layered architecture. A layered system is organized hierarchically, each layer providing service to the layer above it and serving as a client to the layer below. At the outer layer, components will receive the user interface operations, and at the inner layers, components will perform the operating system interfacing, that is, communication and coordination with OS. The connectors are defined by the protocols that determine how the layers will interact. Topological constraints include limiting interactions to adjacent layers. Now, in OSI models also, we have seen the layered architecture. There are 7 layers, one above the other, and there is a sequence of layers which comes above the layer which is above it and which layer comes below a particular layer. So that is a sequence in an OSM model. Okay, and you know that the layer will give service. It take the input from the lower layer and gives the service to the upper layer. So that is a layered architecture. This pattern can be used to structure programs that can be decomposed into groups of subtasks, each of which is at a particular level of abstraction. Each layer provides services to the next higher layer. The most commonly found 4 layers of general information systems are as follows. presentation layer, application layer, business logic layer, and data access layer. Now this is an example of layered layer: code layer, utility layer, application layer, and user interface layer. In Unix also we have seen the architecture. The innermost is the hardware, then comes the kernel, then you have Unix utilities and applications, and the upper layer is the shell or user interface layer. The properties of layered architecture: they support design based on increasing levels of abstraction. This allows implementers to partition a complex problem. They support enhancements because each layer interacts with at most the layers below and above. Changes to one layer affects at the most two layers, and they support reuse. Disadvantages: not all systems are easily structured into a layered fashion. Performance degrades with too many layers, and can be difficult to cleanly assign functionality to the right layer. So this is again a table which is taken, which tells you about the layered pattern solution, its overview, the elements which are the layers, relations, how what is the relation between the two layers. It has one layer below it, one layer above it. What are the constraints and what are the weaknesses. The next is repositories. In a repository style, there are two distinct kinds of components. First, a central data structure represents the current state, and a collection of independent components operate on the central data store. The two major categories of repositories are traditional database and Blackboard. The traditional database: if the system of transaction in an input stream of transactions triggers selection of processes to execute, the repository is traditional database. The next is the Blackboard. If the current state of the central data structure is the main trigger of selecting the processes to execute, the repository is Blackboard. Now these are the diagrams. This is a central Blackboard, which is a shared data, and we have the processes here: process 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, or it is also called as KS1, KS, that is knowledge source 1, knowledge source 2, knowledge source 3, and so on. So you have a memory, that is a Blackboard, which has the data into it, and the processes which are going to do the computations. Now the processes interact directly with the Blackboard. Whenever there is a change in the data or a shared data, which is the Blackboard, a process will be triggered. The Blackboard model is usually presented with three major parts: the knowledge source, separate independent parcels of application-dependent knowledge. Interaction among knowledge sources take place solely through the Blackboard. That means the knowledge sources or the processes, they cannot interact among themselves. They will interact only through the Blackboard, which is a shared data. The Blackboard data structure: problem-solving state data organized into an application-dependent hierarchy. Knowledge sources make changes to the Blackboard that lead incrementally to a solution to the problem. Control: driven by the state of the Blackboard, knowledge sources respond opportunistically when changes in the Blackboard make them applicable. A major difference with traditional database systems is that the invocation of computational elements in a Blackboard architecture is triggered by the current state of the Blackboard and not by external inputs. Knowledge sources, also known as listeners or subscribers, are distinct and independent units. They solve parts of a problem and aggregate partial results. Interaction among knowledge sources takes place uniquely through the Blackboard. The advantages: only one connector, which is a blackboard, is used by everyone. New components can be added easily, that is, the knowledge sources or the processes can be added easily. And the disadvantage is it becomes a bottleneck with too many clients. Next architectural style is the interpreter. An interpreter architecture mimics a coded component using a program written in some language. An interpreter that reads programs in the language and enacts them, and a component that stores the program's current state input to the interpreted program component is sent to the program state, where it is read by the program running on the interpreter. Output produced by the program is placed in the program state, where it can result in output from the interpreted program component's interface. Interpreter has generally four components: an interpretation engine to do the work, a memory that contains the pseudocode to be interpreted, a representation of the control state of the interpretation engine, representation of the current state of the program being simulated. They are used to narrow the gap between the computing engine in the hardware and the semantics of the program. This is the function of an interpreter. Now, other familiar architectures are distributed processes. One of the common form of distributed system architecture is a client-server organization. A server represents a process that provides services to other processes, that is, the clients. Usually, the server does not know in advance the number of clients that will access it at runtime, but the clients know the identity of a server. Main program or subroutine organizations. For language without support for modularization, a system is organized around the main program and a set of subroutines. The main program acts as a driver for the subroutine, typically providing a control loop for sequencing through subroutines in some order. Now its example is a C programming, where your execution starts only at main, and if you are making a project in C, there will be number of modules, and all these modules will be subroutines. So that is an example of main program and subroutine organizations. Next is domain-specific software architectures. These architectures provide an organization structure tailored to a family of applications such as vehicle management system. That is, for a vehicle management system, you are going to have a specific software architecture. So the domain here is a vehicle management system. So for this particular thing only, you will be having a architecture. Now, other familiar architectures: state transition systems and process control systems. State transition systems: these systems are defined in terms of a set of states and a set of named transitions that move a system from one state to another. Process control systems: systems intended to provide dynamic control of a physical environment, are often organized as process control systems. These systems are roughly categorized as a feedback loop in which inputs from sensors are used by the process control system to determine a set of outputs that will produce a new state of the environment. Heterogeneous architectures. Most of the systems involve some combination of several styles. Now, there are several ways in which architectural styles can be combined. First, hierarchy. A component as a system organized in one architectural style may have an internal structure that is developed in a completely different style. Second, a single component may use a mixture of architectural connectors, example interfaces and pipes.
A component might access a repository through part of its interface, but interact through pipes with other components in a system. And third, completely elaborate one level of architecture description in a completely different architectural style. So these were the architectural styles and other familiar architectures and heterogeneous architectures. Thank you.